Hello, students. Welcome to your English class once again. As you know, we are continuing the chapter in the book Flamingo, chapter number 1. The name is The Last Lesson. In this chapter, till now, we have read that how, after defeating France in war, the Prussians wanted to rule over not only the territory of France but also over the minds and hearts of the people. It means they wanted to force them to use German language instead of their own mother tongue, French language. And the story reinforces the fact that we value something more when it is lost. We realize the value of anything when it is lost forever. So, the same way, the people of France were realizing the value of their mother tongue when they were ordered never to use it anymore from the next day. So now here this is the story and a narration from a boy's point of view, the little boy Franz, who was thinking a lot of things after knowing that he is going to lose his language forever. He was thinking about the importance of his language and he was listening to his teacher, Mr. M. Hamel, also carefully, who was telling them the importance of their language by saying that if a country kept its language, only then it could never be enslaved by another country. Means always you have to respect and honor your mother tongue and never try to escape from learning it properly. This was the view of Mr. M. Hamel, and Franz felt bad that he had not studied harder. After that, Mr. M. Hamel had his final lessons in the class, and the students all studied very diligently because this was the last day of learning French for them. So they all were realizing the importance in a better way, how important their language, their mother tongue was for them. So everybody was very serious about learning the language. And now we are continuing further for in the story. In the last chapter, we have read up to this line when Franz was thinking, looking to the pigeons, that will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? He was thinking about nature basically, that human beings can force other human beings to go in their own way, but they can't force the nature. Nature always goes in its own way. So, whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw M. Hamel sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. So, here Franz is doing his writing work also in French language and observing his teacher M. Hamel also, who was looking very depressed and sitting motionless in his chair, and he was looking continuously, gazing to everything in present in the class as if he wanted to capture all that views forever in his mind. Fancy, imagine, for 40 years he had been there in the same place with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him. So it's a fact. Wherever you are living since many years and suddenly you are told to leave that place, it's very difficult to detach yourself from that thing. So the same situation was Mr. M. Hamid, just like that. Only the desks and benches had been worn smooth, the walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hop vine that he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. Everything is explained in detail here, that the desk and benches which had been in use for 40 years now, the walnut trees which were grown in his garden were taller, and the hop vine, a kind of climber that he had planted himself, it grew and reached to windows and roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all. It was heartbreaking, really, to leave everything. Poor man, to hear his sister, moving about in the room above. Poor man, Mr. M. Hamel, who was hearing his sister moving about in the room on the above floor, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country next day. So he was feeling sad and depressed, but he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. It is about Mr. M. Hamel. After the writing, we had a lesson in history. Franz is telling about now himself and the other people who were sitting there and doing writing work under the guidance of Mr. M. Hamel. They had a lesson in history later. And then the babies chanted. After the history lesson, the babies, the kids who were sitting in class, they chanted ba, be, bi, bo, boo. This is a kind of alphabets which, as you say, A, B, C, D, E. Same in the French language. The babies were chanting ba, be, bi, bo, boo. Down there at the back of the room, old Hauser had put on his spectacles and holding his primer in both hands. Primer is a primary class book. He was holding that book tightly in his hands, spelled the letters. He was trying to spell the letters by saying with them. You could see that he too was crying. Everybody was feeling sad and everybody was crying because it was the last day of learning French for them. His voice trembled with emotion. He was full of emotions for his mother tongue, and his voice was trembling, shivering. And it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. So, in normal days, they would have laughed listening to him like this, but that was a different day. So, they wanted to cry. Ah, how well I remember it, that last lesson. These are the sad feelings of Franz about losing his mother tongue. All at once, the church clock struck 12. Then the Angelus. Angelus is the prayer sung in church. At the same moment, the trumpets of the Prussians. The trumpets are a kind of musical instrument which is blown by the Prussian at the same time as they were learning their French lessons. Same time, below their classroom window, they could listen to the blowing of trumpets by the Prussian soldiers who were returning from their drill, who were returning from their everyday practice, sounded under our windows. M. Hamel stood up, very pale. His face was pale because of sadness and depression. In his chair, I never saw him look so tall. Look so tall is a kind of phrase which means he never saw him this way before, sad and depressed. My friends, said he. He was trying to say something, I, but he was not able to speak. But something choked him, something choked his throat. He could not go on. Then he could not continue further. Then he turned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and bearing on with all his might, using all his power to stand up, he wrote as large as he could. In large words, he wrote on the blackboard, Vive la France. This is a French phrase, French language phrase, which means long live France. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed. You may go. This is the end of our story where we can see the extreme sadness on everybody's face and the feeling of depression due to losing their own mother tongue. And after this, we will do question answers. So, you all be ready to take question answers next. Thank you for today.